Good morning. We'll get started in just a few moments. Make sure everything's working like it should be. Just a few moments. Looks like everything's working fine. Hope everyone's doing well. Good morning. Get started in just a second. If you have a question or a comment, just add it to the comment section. I'll try to get to it before the end of the meeting. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, Sunnyvale. Happy Friday. Welcome to my weekly virtual office hours. This week's early artwork is actually from another mural, but this one's on the fence of the Palo Alto Medical Building on Old San Francisco. So it's two hands passing on, a flower between them. I think it's pretty unique. So it's a monochrome artwork along that fence line along Old San Francisco. So if you haven't seen it, it's pretty interesting from that standpoint. I always like to highlight the different artwork that we have, around our city or any artwork that I find during, my travels, going to meetings, or traveling, for conferences. So always, always happy to, highlight artwork, and the art in our city is pretty good. We're always adding to it, highlighted some of the new artwork that the city added last week, so several new art pieces in Moffett Park, but we're constantly having new pieces of art around the city. And, that's one of the nice things to discover and, or seek out, what the interesting pieces of artwork here. So anyway, good morning. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thank you for joining me again this week. Welcome to March and a little more rain, it looks like. This is the 154th installment of my weekly office hours. Hopefully everyone is doing well, staying healthy, staying dry this weekend as the rain comes back. We've now reached 1,082 days since the March 16th, 2020 county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. Almost 3 years ago now, I converted my weekly coffee shop office hours into this weekly live stream address. I've been on council now for 6.5 years and I've been doing my office hours. But this, converting it into this weekly live stream has been very useful, especially during COVID, of course. And except for a week of surgery, I haven't missed a week since the beginning of COVID. People still say they appreciate hearing from their mayor each week, whether or not they're watching it live or watching it, video delayed by days or sometimes weeks. I get comments, but these weekly addresses really allow me to reach a lot more people than my in-person office hours. They allow me to provide you some updates, tell you about some of the upcoming events, and answer some of your questions on what's happening in the city, and give you some words of encouragement on whether or not there's issues. But for me, this has been a great way to reach people, and so just thank you for allowing me to continue to represent Sunnyvale and work for you and what you're interested in. So most Fridays like today, I follow up this live stream address with an in-person meetings at Being Seen on Murphy Avenue. You can, if you want to reserve a 15-minute or 30-minute time slot, you can just email me at council@larryklein.com. And we can figure out a time, a time slot that will work for you. Usually I'm pretty busy. It's amazing. It's a great use of, maximizing my time because, people show up as opposed to meeting, 10 people during the week. And every time I meet somebody, it's 45 minutes or an hour or more. It's a good way to cycle through a lot of people in a short period of time. And they come with prioritized issues lists and all that. So thank you for meeting with me. And I think, we've actually kicked off a lot of great things from those meetings. So let's go ahead and talk about what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last 2 weeks. Last Monday was President's Day, so city offices were closed. Last week was fairly quiet, except of course for all the rains that we had. We had we had a very windy week, lots of trees losing their branches, and a few being uprooted, but we made it through without major incident. Last Thursday, there was supposed to be a village rhythm drumming for African American History Month. That was actually canceled. We're hoping to reschedule that for those that were looking forward to that. I know I was there, and a lot of people were turned away. So hopefully we can get that rescheduled sometime soon. Last Friday marked the 1-year anniversary of the beginning of the war in Ukraine. So President Biden had a surprise visit to Kyiv last week. And then, last Friday, Biden announced further funding for Ukraine and Moldova and new sanctions for certain Russian and Chinese companies. So that continues. We're hoping to see an end to that sometime in the next year. It's hard to see, I watch on the news how that's affected so many people in the Ukraine, and the concept of continuing this somewhat a puppet war between major powers is not good for anyone, and especially as we ratchet up the rhetoric of nuclear weapons and that worry, it's not good for the world in any way. Last Saturday, I was actually in Oakland for the swearing-in ceremony of our California Attorney General, Rob Bonta. So it was good to see some the East Bay Area people that I don't see that often. So the mayor of Oakland and several other city mayors that were there, as well as some of the state assembly people and federal Congress people that I don't normally get to see that aren't representing the South Bay. So it was good from that standpoint. And it was great to hear more of Rob Bonta's story. And it was a very family-friendly affair, having his mom there and his family there for that swearing in. So a really, really fun event. And it's good to know, higher level state executives, when issues come around, that's an important part of, representing our city. And so happy to continue to do that outreach. As far as this week, on Tuesday, the COVID state of emergency ended for California. And so, California was one of, I think, 8 states that still had statewide COVID states of emergency in effect. So we ended ours on Tuesday, and that ends a certain amount of support that the county, that the state was actually providing as far as testing and as far as vaccinations are concerned. The federal health emergency won't be ending until May 11th. But it really means that from from a cost standpoint, before, all of your testing, all of your vaccinations were free. Private insurers now won't have to cover 100% of the COVID-19 costs. They will be doing cost sharing. So we'll have to start paying a lot more for those tests and for those vaccinations. So that's one of the major changes, from a council standpoint. We had a little more flexibility that we could decide to take all meetings in person or remotely. This kind of goes back to new rules that were put in place regarding the Brown Act. We have to kind of go back to somewhat of a hybrid solution, and from a meeting direction, council has already made the direction that meetings going forward will be hybrid for the city. So residents, certain city staff can be there remote and call in remotely, but the majority of council and critical city staff, the city manager, city attorney, will normally be there in person. We do have the flexibility to, if we're sick, if we've been exposed, taking that meeting remotely several times a year. But in general, or you can be at a public, if you're traveling, one of the things that we do, and this has always been part of the Brown Act, is you can notice 3 days ahead of time that you're at a public place. You make that available to the public. You post it 3 days before, and ultimately you have 2 different meeting locations for a specific meeting. But the big thing is, it means that our boards and commission members will ultimately be back in person. So that's one of the things that the old Brown Act didn't allow, is those commissions to run remotely. And I've already been to several meetings with the county, which had zero remote capabilities for residents. So you had to be in the room only. So all the commissioners and all the public that wanted to talk on a topic or hear what's going on a topic, they had to be there in person. So definitely what our city's been doing, I think, is a positive sort of thing. And going forward, it makes it a lot better for residents who have kids at home or don't want to stay at City Hall until 10 p.m. at night, and they don't have to get childcare. They can just call into the meeting, and when their specific item that they want to speak on comes up, they can give that to public testimony. So I think it makes it a lot better from an equity standpoint and an accessibility standpoint for those in our community. And then as Tuesday evening of this week, council met and we interviewed our applicants for our boards and commissions. So, our boards and commissions are really critical to the operation of the city. They do community outreach. They work with city staff, and they give recommendations to council on a variety of topics, and so, we take applications year round, but we do interviews kind of on a quarterly basis, depending upon what positions on those boards and commissions open up, and whether or not it's somebody moved, somebody got busy with work and had to resign, or somebody, ultimately term limits after 8 years on a board or commission. So, every 4 years, their terms are 4 years. And sometimes actually they decide that, okay, I'll give that, board or commission seat to somebody else. And so, that's one of the things that's a good way to start getting active in our city. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly COVID numbers. COVID numbers across the nation continue to trend downwards. From a national standpoint, we've now reached 103.5 million cases. That's up about 250,000 in the last week. Nationally, we've had 268 million people with at least one shot, 81% of our population. I think, I saw numbers this week that 1 in 10 people have not gotten COVID. 90% of our public has had COVID at least one time, if not multiple times, over the last 3 years. For deaths, we still have people passing away with COVID, but that number is relatively down. We've had about 2,500 in the last week. So we now have 1,119,000 people pass away with COVID. As far as California, our numbers are looking, relatively good. We've had, 11,100,000 positive cases. We continue to trend downward, although, our daily average is finally starting to go back down. It's now 2,700 new cases a day. That's down from 2,900 the last few weeks. But we're getting closer to the 2,600, 2,400 that we had a month ago. And, our test case positivity is still at 6.5% average for the last 8 weeks. So that's staying relatively stable. California passed 100,000 deaths related to COVID last week. So now we've had 100,424 deaths. That's about approximately 300 deaths in the last week related to COVID. From the county standpoint, we've now passed a cumulative case count of 474,000. That's up about just 1,200 since last week. We've had 15 additional deaths. So 2,683 deaths in the county related to COVID. And then vaccinations, more than 95% of our adults are fully vaccinated, and, more than 70% of those that are eligible for the booster have received it. So, we've done very well from a county standpoint as we're looking at kind of the end of COVID. And I'll stop, focusing on the COVID numbers. We might be changing this up, and as far as how these meetings go, the frequency of this meeting, this live stream address. But to me, it's been good to kind of follow the data over the last 3 years and look at how our county has responded. And thank you for what you've done. You've responded in a very positive way, and so thank you for all that the residents in our community do. I continue to do a lot of time advocating on our city's behalf at the county level, talking to county health, county supervisors, as far as the kind of the end of the COVID emergency. The county sponsored testing and vaccination sites have closed at the end of February. And there's currently no plan to restart them anytime soon. It's like ultimately you do have to basically rely on your healthcare provider to provide, those vaccinations, those boosters, those tests as far as that's concerned. Let's go ahead and go to some of the upcoming events. So next Thursday, March 9th, there'll be a holy event at the Sunnyvale Library. Holi is the, Indian festival of colors, of joy, of equity, so they'll have a Hindu storyteller, Pushpita Prasad, will be talking about Holi and the festival of colors. It's interesting. So it'll kind of talk about the meaning, the history, and kind of the traditions about that, this Indian festival. And, it celebrates the triumph of good over evil through those brightly colored, powders and chalks. But it's a little bit more. It's not just about colors. It also carries, some cultural history and spiritual depth as far as that's concerned. So if you have a chance, that's happening at the library, Sunnyvale Library at 7 p.m. on the 9th. And then Sunnyvale's EV event is back. And I'll say it's not this Sunday, not this Saturday, it's a week from Saturday, March 11th. And, this is our EV ride and drive. It's electrifying your ride. So this will be Saturday, March 11th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Sunnyvale Community Center. And people can, ride as passengers in EVs. They can take the driver's seat in the EVs, but You'll have experts there. You'll have EV owners talking about their cars. And you'll also this time have a chance to try out various e-bikes and take them for a spin. So definitely, it should be a fun event, but it's not just cars now, it's also e-bikes. So I know a lot of people are very happy to have their e-bikes, and it'll be good to hear from some of them. And then next Thursday, March 16th from 6 to 8 p.m., we'll be having another Sunnyvale Unity event. And we've been having these on a yearly basis for the last 4 years while I've been mayor. And this one will be focusing on overcoming bigotry. And it'll be at the Lakewood Elementary School. So that's in Lakewood Park. It's the school right there, the elementary school right next to Lakewood Park. And, it's kind of, it's promoting, our Unity events have really promoted, culture and belonging. And, for me, it's highlighting the diversity of our community and making sure that people feel welcome, feel safe, feel respected. So, hopefully people will be able to attend that. And then March 19th and 20th, that weekend, will be the Friday, there'll be the Friends of the Sunnyvale Library book sale weekend. So, always happy to attend that. And, a lot of people look forward to that every month or two when the Friends run that. And then as far as upcoming council meetings on March 14th, we'll have a study session to talk about our housing element and reply as far as that's concerned. We'll be declaring March as Women's History Month and Red Cross Month, and we'll be appointing our new representatives to our boards and commissions for the applications and interviews that we just had. On March 21st, we'll be selecting the preferred alignment for Stevens Creek Trail. And so that's the area from Remington to Fremont. And, the project defines several potential paths, and there's been several outreach meetings on that. So council will choose the final pathways, and then we'll be approving our Housing Element 2022 annual progress report. So we'll be doing that evening. So that's it for upcoming meetings. If you have questions, just add them to the chat or email them to me at council@larryklein.com, and I'll get to them when I can, hopefully at an upcoming, if possible today, but at an upcoming virtual session is always good. Let me get to our weekly questions. Sihat asked, there's a surge in homeless tents across the city. I hope that people are getting the treatment they need. This situation requires immediate attention. Otherwise, our city will not be different than San Francisco or Oakland. Thank you for your help. So yeah, totally agree. That there's, although looking at the point in time counts that happened at the beginning of this year, the numbers aren't, or at least looking at last year's numbers, and we're still waiting for this year's numbers to be distributed. We actually, our point in time counts last year, it actually went down a little bit, but definitely we are seeing, certain unhoused in tents around our city. And, Sunnyvale approved a contract with Home First last year. So our council approved this contract to do outreach, to reserve beds at shelters, to offer them to the unhoused residents. The county is really in charge of providing a lot of the services and running the shelter services for unhoused. But, it's making sure that we have the people on the ground here in the city, and ultimately beds to provide the unhoused. That was one of the things that Oakland got into a big, had a lot of issues, had from a judicial standpoint, that they were trying to abate some of their encampments, and they weren't providing, shelter beds. And that to me is really important. Whether or not the unhoused will take them is a whole different issue, but you need to at least provide that warm and safe location for them to go to. So I think that's really important. And, one of the things that council did earlier this year is we added to our strategic priorities that the servicing our unhoused community is one of our new strategic priorities this year. And then, one of the other things that we did was council approved hiring an unhoused services manager. So kind of going along with that priority study issue, and that will be coming back to council later this year, I think actually in the next few months, basically fully defining what that position is. And I think it's mainly to have a point of contact working with Sunnyvale Community Services, Downtown Streets team, Helping Hands, working with the county to deal with the unhoused issues in our community. And so that I think is critical. It's a staff position that we didn't have, and we always take, adding on to staff positions very, very seriously, because we look at, the 20-year plan from a city standpoint. But I do think that is critical. We looked at, one of our study issues that we're looking at this year is adding additional unhoused transitional housing for families, for couples. And that's one of the things that I've been working on with several groups to try to get transitional housing within Sunnyvale. And so we have several other cities that are doing that. So I think that's one of the things that working with developers to get that funding and making sure that it's a possibility. Carrie asked, would you please repeat your email address on how to reach you? So yeah, so I have lots of different ways that you can reach me. council@larryklein.com is one of the ways. I have mayor@larryklein.com. I have my official city address, which is kleincouncil@sunnyvale.ca.gov. You can add to the chat here. I have lots of people that chat me through Facebook or Nextdoor. That's one of the hardest things about being mayor, is so many different emails and chats coming from different locations make it a little difficult as far as that's concerned to figure out and follow up sometimes with people. Robbie asked, where do I report down trees? So for down trees in Sunnyvale before, from like 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., it's 408-730-7506. After 4 p.m., it's our non-emergency number, 408-730-7180. And that's also the number that you can call if you see a down power line. Remember, never approach a down power line. Same thing if you see down trees or limbs. That's one of the things that you can do, and reporting it to PG&E, reporting it to the city as soon as possible. And so city staff can come out and deal with limbs, deal with branches and such. Derek asked, hi, Larry, thank you for your posts. A city street tree fell last night and crushed my car that was parked on the street. The city came last night to clear what they could, but they will be back to finish up today. Who do I contact to the city about this? So sorry to hear about your problem, with the heavy rains, the saturated grounds, all the wind that we had last week. This is an issue I've heard of, not that often, but, every few months I normally hear about that. But, you can search for claims on the city website to declare a claim for damage on your car, on your property. And so that's something that, we hope doesn't happen, but, it does happen intermittently, and that's what you do. Julie commented, I love the art that you posted. Where can I learn more about the art in the city? So yeah, if you take a look at the post that I put up last week, you can see links to an art page that we have on our city website. It lists several walking tours. There's, I think, 5 preset walking tours for different parts of the city. And one of the things that Sunnyvale does is require art and private development. So for every office building, for every retail establishment, a percentage of the cost of building that building goes towards art. And so it's actually, I'm always happy to see new art spring up around the city as we add new development. And then, the city is doing the similar thing at, on city property. So, we did the Sunnyvale or the Washington Park Swim Center last year. We had several new art pieces out in front of the swim center. We're doing the new City Hall. City Hall will be opening up later this month, and there's artwork that will be added to that. So happy to see art in the city. But yeah, if you take a look at that, if you search for art on the city webpage, you'll also see there's basically a map with all the different pieces of art around the city, and you can kind of page through photos of that art to take a look. Robert commented, city needs to start servicing the trees around Sunnyvale. We call for trees to be trimmed at North Eden and South Eden, and nothing has been done. So the city, when you call, it goes out and evaluates, are there emergency trimming that needs to get done? The city has a schedule to trim every tree in the city every 7 years. So it's a cycle of moving around the city and continuing to trim those trees. When residents report an issue, the arborist checks the trees to see if, city staff needs to do that immediately. Otherwise, most of the tree trimming happens late spring and summertime. And during COVID, council reduced tree trimming to kind of reduce city expenses, just to make sure that we didn't have to lay off people, make sure that, city operations went smoothly. But one of the budget proposals that will come back as part of this year's budget is to catch up on the delayed tree trimming over the last 2 years. And so getting us back on that 7-year cycle. So I'm fairly certain that council will be approving that later, when for next year's budget. And so next year's budget starts on July 1st. And so I'm assuming that we'll be picking up and speeding up the amount of trees being trimmed over the next few years. Let's see. Maribel asked, I was wondering if there's something you can do so that for people that want to enjoy our parks, Muwekma parking lot is being used by people that are not at the park. My guess is construction workers, please help. So yes, I contacted city staff, and staff reminded the construction company that parking was for in the park was for residents only, and not for construction. And actually no construction parking signs did go up. I did go by there earlier this week, and yes, those signs are there. Happy to see that the parking lot looked fairly empty midday, except for, the people, you had some families there with kids, you had some people at the dog park. So it's being used the way it should be used. So happy that seems to have fixed the problem. I think that's it for questions. Cynthia asked, I saw big signboards on Murphy Avenue in downtown. What is that announcing? So part of our process of converting, Murphy Avenue into pedestrian zone, we need to follow the Pedestrian Mall Act of 1960. And so there'll be, we declared our intention to make it into a pedestrian zone earlier this year. But now we need to finalize that conversion, and that is another public meeting. So that's the May 16th meeting to get public input on that actual conversion. So it's a stepwise process, but that's one of the meetings that's coming up in May. Let's see if there's any comments on questions. I don't see any questions on this. So let me go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for joining me again this week. We still live in uncertain times, and new issues come up, almost every day, but I want you to know that no matter what challenges we face them together. I'm proud of Sunnyvale and how our residents responded to our challenges, especially over the last few years during COVID. I'm thankful for everyone in our community that helps out, showing their kindness, showing their generosity. Your actions and your attitude really do make a difference. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together, and we will get through this together. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.